joining you today. Special thanks, of course, to CCG and Dr. Wang, as well as IOM's Chief of Mission, of course, Mr. Crocetti. It is a real delight to be partnering again with CCG as China's leading think tank in terms of globalization, bringing the research, the evidence to China through this very important translation. So we're really delighted to be partnering again with CCG, and we thank the translation team. It's a large report, and thank you very much for all of your efforts. What I will do in the next sort of 15 or so minutes is really just provide some insights from the report. It is a substantial report. It's a truly global report. We try and capture the range of dynamics that are occurring around the world in regards to migration and mobility. So really my job here is just to provide a few insights and encourage you, as Mr. Crocetti said, to access the report in the Chinese language and the other languages that are available, and to really interrogate and have a look at that evidence, the analysis, and use it in your jobs and in your work. And that's what we've found through our review processes, through our evaluation processes, to continuously improve on the report, and we welcome your feedback on the report, of course, too. So just to situate the World Migration Report, IOM's flagship report that has been produced since the year 2000, I just thought I would just mention the mission, how the evidence base is really important to IOM's mission. Of course, we work on operational issues as well. We certainly uphold the human dignity and well-being of migrants. That's core to our mission. Encourage social and economic development, including through the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, Regular Migration and the Sustainable Development Goals, of course. But here, with this contribution, the World Migration Report is about advancing evidence-based understanding of migration issues, including in an environment in which we know misinformation and disinformation on a range of topics, including migration and migrants, is increasing. From our Director General, just highlighting here from the forward of the World Migration Report, I guess two key points that I've bolded here. Our rationale for the report is to provide in clear and accurate terms changes that are occurring. So we look at the global trends, the regional trends, as well as key and complex issues in migration every 2 years. It's also our obligation, including as a United Nations agency, as an intergovernmental organization, to demystify the complexity and the growing diversity around human mobility. So this is what we seek to do every 2 years through the World Migration Report. A quick recap, and again, as Dr. Wang highlighted, CCG has been partnering with us on Chinese translations for several editions, of course. We have put emphasis on making sure that languages are expanded for accessibility of readers all around the world. So in the year 2000, this is when the first report was produced. It was previously a thematic report, so it covered a very specific theme, such as in 2015, it was migrants and cities. But since 2018, we have really listened to readers. We've listened to member states, to our partners who we work with, including applied and academic researchers, and we found that we needed to transform it into a global reference report. So now, since the 2018 edition, we have part 1 on key migration data and information on migrants globally and regionally. And then in part 2, we look at complex and emerging issues. It's strongly aligned to IOM's migration data strategy, as well as the Secretary General's data strategy as well. As we know, data capture, data analysis is increasingly important in our digital world. It's highly collaborative, and as I mentioned, the report outputs, we've put particular emphasis in making sure that the report is accessible. So in 2005, we were just producing in one language, that was in English, of course. 2015, we moved up to 5, and I'm pleased to say that for 2020 and 2022, we're moving to 10 languages, all 6 UN languages, as well as others. across the bottom there, you can see more recently, since 2021, the World Migration Report, I'm really pleased to say, has won a number of international awards. Here is the table of contents for the current edition of the World Migration Report, the 2022 edition. Particularly in the context of Dr. Wang's opening remarks, it's important to highlight how migration and mobility are situated. And in the report overview, we do look at the technological, the geopolitical, and the environmental transformations to situate how migration and mobility is affected by these. I will go through some key highlights from chapters 2 and 3 for you. We'll not be talking about part 2, but I would encourage you, if you're interested in COVID-19's impact on migration and mobility, or if you're particularly working on climate change, to have a look at the contents. The chapters are also downloadable individually in English, and the full report is available completely, full report in Chinese, of course. Now, in terms of chapter 1, as I mentioned, we do situate the changes that are occurring in migration and mobility globally by looking at the 3 really big global transformations that are occurring. And that is not to say that there are not ongoing economic transformations, geographic transformations, such as urbanization, for example. But this is really to highlight that the intensification of technological, geopolitical, and environmental change is really impacting on migration and human mobility around the world. In chapter 1, because it was IOM's 70th anniversary last year, we also provide some insights in terms of how the organisation has changed and how our regional offices have responded to the growing challenges as well as the growing benefits of international migration. Also, key migration data at a glance, again, getting feedback from readers. We have provided for the first time several pages of key migration data at a glance so that it is able to be used for teaching purposes, for briefing purposes, if you're briefing ministers or senior officials, for teaching, for media, for a range of different aspects. Very quickly, in terms of global trends, just thought I would highlight some key outputs and some key data. But of course, as you can see the blue bar there, we cover a wide range of key themes. We look at international migrants, numbers and trends. We look at international migration flows, migrant workers, remittances is a key issue. And as Dr. Wang mentioned, China is now has become number 2 in terms of the inflows of international remittances globally. We also look at refugees and asylum seekers, internally displaced persons, IDPs, as well as what is new for this edition is the strong focus, of course, on COVID-19, which has had a massive impact on migration and mobility, including various groups of migrants around the world. One thing that might surprise you, it surprises most people when we look at the long-term data, is that we are seeing a global gender gap that is growing in terms of international migrant stock. So what we can see is that while the number of female migrants has grown over time, the growth has not been at the same rates as male migrants. There is a growing gender gap in international migration. So we really need to call into question the previous discussions of the feminization of migration. I would encourage you to look at chapter 2 because we do go into some of the reasons why. We do know, for example, that particular corridors are becoming heavily male, whereas other corridors have gender parity, and that's related to the structure of economies, the occupations that are in demand as well. So I would encourage you to explore the report, including the interactive platform on that particular issue. Again, headline graph just to pique your interest. This is ICAO data looking at air passengers since 1945, and we can see here the very, very dramatic impact of COVID-19. Unprecedented, of course, as you can see in that graph. The blue line is total passengers globally, and then we have it broken down by domestic air passengers as well as international air passengers. And we can see that migrants became stranded around the world in various different settings and different circumstances. The health-related impacts meant that many groups, including migrants, were more vulnerable to the virus. Migrant workers also, at the same time, paradoxically became essential workers, such as in transport, in healthcare, in agriculture and harvesting, some of whom, of course, were even undocumented, but still essential to societies and to economies around the world. And we can also see that the deepening of digitalization in an already digitalizing world has had a really significant impact from COVID. One other graph that I thought I would highlight, again, just to pique your interest, there is analysis around this, but this is looking particularly at internal displacements, so new internal displacements in 2020. And we can see here at the top, this is a particular favorite of mine, because we can see here at the top, conflict internal displacement. Just the locations, as a quick glance, you can see that that is much narrower compared to disaster displacement. And here, disaster displacement, we are talking about floods, hurricanes, wildfires, and so forth. If we look at the actual numbers behind the locations, it's 42 countries were affected by new internal displacements due to conflict and violence, the orange at the top, whereas 144 countries were affected by new internal displacements due to disaster, such as floods, hurricanes, and wildfires. In one particular picture, we can see that there is an ongoing and systemic issue when we look at the trend data as well around the growing rate of internal displacements due to disaster. In terms of regional trends and developments, we do look at the 6 UN regions. So here we are talking about Africa, Asia, Europe, Latin America and the Caribbean, Northern America and Oceania. And the reason why we do this is we try and situate, again, some of the big trends, long-term trends, particularly over 30 years for this particular output. And we try and show how comparatively regions have very, very different patterns. And I'll just show you very quickly. You can see on the left-hand side is Asia, and on the right-hand side is Latin America and the Caribbean. And automatically you can see the patterns are extremely different. We can see, for example, that migrants to Asia are fairly similar for also for the Latin America and the Caribbean, very muted, hasn't really changed too much. This is the bar on the left-hand side. But what is very different are the two other bars, migrants within Asia and migrants from Asia. Looks very different to the patterns over the last 30 years from in regards to Latin America and the Caribbean. Migrants within Asia has increased tremendously. There has been a lot of internal migration within the region at the international level, and of course, notwithstanding internal migration as well. Whereas on the right-hand side, we can see that most of the migration is dominated by one region, which is Northern America as the key destination country. And within Northern America, it is, of course, the United States of America over the long period. We can also see, for example, showing this regional comparative analysis, that we have very different approaches in regards to and responses and results in regards to refugees and asylum seekers. On the left-hand side is Africa, and this is actually quite a unique graph. It isn't, this pattern is not replicated in any of the other UN world regions, is that key countries within Africa are both the origins of large populations of refugees and destinations of large populations of refugees. And of course, these are protracted situations. And as I mentioned, this is rather unique around the world. And you can see it's mainly Eastern Horn of Africa within the African continent. Very different situation on the right-hand side, which is Asia, with the top refugee and asylum seeker countries, where it's usually one country will be either an origin or a destination of refugees and asylum seekers. very quickly, just want to show you something that is new since the last report. We have engaged with specialists and partners around the world to be producing the interactive platform. It has been tremendously successful, and this is where we've won most of the international awards, because it provides data visualization that is interactive. Users are able to go into the platform to actually look at the key corridors, to be able to look at the long-term trend data, to be able to look at the analysis in real time and interact with it. Depending on which part of the world they're interested in, they can actually then zoom in and look at very specific data outputs. Lastly, and again, running out of time, but thank you so much again for this opportunity. I'd really just like to highlight again how important it is for IOM to be making sure that the World Migration Report is available in many different official languages of different countries. Of course, we are, again, really delighted to be partnering with CCG on the Chinese translation. And with other partners from around the world, and with the support of donors, we've also been able to translate key parts of the report into Swahili, Portuguese, as well as German. And this is particularly important for developing country contexts who need the report in their official languages. Thank you very much again, and thank you for your time.